Hi friends, I welcome you all here at TNV Academy. In this session, we are going to talk about the clause 7.6 knowledge of an international standard ISO IEC 20000-1 2018 Information Technology Service Management. In this session, we shall cover all the requirements of clause 7.6 knowledge in detail along with appropriate examples. As the requirements of the clause 7.6 depends on the requirements of clause 6.2, clause 7.1, clause 7.2, clause 7.3, clause 7.4 and clause 7.5. I would like to recommend you referring these clauses of ISO 20000-1 2018 also for better understanding of clause 7.6. Let's discuss about the outcome of this session. After completing this session, you will be enabled to determine and maintain the knowledge necessary to support the operations of the SMS and the services. You will also learn about relevancy and usability of knowledge and availability to appropriate persons. Now, let's have an introduction of subclause 7.6 knowledge. Let me simply read first the requirements of the subclause 7.6 knowledge of the standard. Subclause 7.6 knowledge. The organization shall determine and maintain the knowledge necessary to support the operation of the SMS and the services. The knowledge shall be relevant, usable, and available to appropriate persons. Here is a note. Knowledge is specific to the organization, its SMS, services, and interested parties. Knowledge is used and shared to support the achievement of the intended outcomes and the operation of the SMS and the services. Now, let's start with the clause 7.6. Clause 7.6 have been added newly in the ISO 20000-1 2018 to determine what knowledge is needed to support the SMS and the services and how this knowledge is maintained and made available. Clause 7.6 says that the organization shall determine and maintain knowledge required as part of the service management system. Clause says that the knowledge shall be relevant to support SMS and should be usable to meet out the requirements of the SMS. The knowledge should be available to appropriate persons in organization and should be maintained to make SMS effective. The new ISO 20000-1 2018 standard introduces the term knowledge, as knowledge was not addressed by the previous ISO 20000-1 2011 standard. The depth of this topic and the approach to it are new. ISO 20000-1 2018 defines the requirements for the handling of organizational knowledge in the following 4 phases, which are corresponding to the PDCA cycle. Here are some points. Point 1. Determine the knowledge essential for the operation of processes and for achieving conformity of products and services. Point 2. Maintain knowledge and make it available to the level necessary. Point 3. Consider the existing knowledge and compare it to shifting needs and trends. Point 4. Procure the necessary additional knowledge. The organization should determine the knowledge necessary for the operation of its processes and accomplish conformity of products and services. This knowledge shall be maintained and made available to the level necessary. When talking changing needs and trends, the organization shall consider its current knowledge and determine how to acquire or access any necessary additional knowledge and required updates. When talking changing needs and trends, the organization shall consider its current knowledge and determine how to acquire or access any necessary additional knowledge and required updates. Knowledge is specific to the organization. It is generally gained by experience. It is information that is used and shared to achieve the organization's objectives. Knowledge can be based on internal sources. For example, intellectual property, the knowledge gained from experience, lessons learned from failures and successful projects, capturing and sharing undocumented knowledge and experience, the results of improving in processes, products, and services. Next is external sources. For example, standards, academia, meetings, conferences, gathering knowledge from customers or external sources. Organization should have a system for determining, collecting, and making available significant data for the operation of its processes to achieve conformity of SMS. The process for considering and governing former, existing, and supplementary knowledge needs to take account of the organization's context, including its size and complexity, the risk and opportunities it needs to address, and the need for accessibility of knowledge. The equilibrium between knowledge held by capable people and knowledge made available by other means is at the choice of the organization, provided that conformity of products and services can be achieved. Requirements regarding knowledge were introduced so as to defend the organization from loss of knowledge which may occur due to staff turnover, failure to capture and share information. Also, the standard desired to encourage the organization to acquire knowledge by learning from experience, mentoring, and benchmarking, etc. Firstly, we need to understand that this new clause is not a knowledge management standard, nor does it require an organization to have knowledge management in place as a formal requirement. It is a clause in a standard and requires that adequate attention is paid to knowledge to ensure the good and reliable quality of services. To comply, however, an organization needs to have many knowledge management elements operating as opposed to plan. As part of the SMS, there has to be an appropriate approach to knowledge retention, including mentoring, implicit knowledge capture, and knowledge sharing. There has to be some form of knowledge audit, knowledge benchmarking, and knowledge strategy, enough to identify the critical knowledge needed to deliver quality services and the main knowledge gaps. There has to be a structure, roles, processes, and supporting technology for maintaining knowledge and making it available to the extent necessary. Now, let me talk about knowledge resources. Business knowledge can exist on several different levels, which I am explaining now. Individual, personal, often tactic knowledge, know-how of some sort. It can also be explicit, but it must be individual in nature, for example, a private diary. Groups, community. Knowledge held in groups but not shared with the rest of the organization. Companies usually consist of communities, most often informally created, which are linked together by common practice. These community of practice may share common values, language, procedures, know-how, etc. They are a source of learning and a source for tactic, explicit, and other types of knowledge. Structural. Knowledge found in processes, culture, etc. This may be understood by many or few members of the organization. For example, the knowledge in the routines used by the ethical hackers may not be known by the software engineers who follow these routines. At times, structural knowledge may be the remainder of past, otherwise long forgotten lessons, where the knowledge of this lesson exists exclusively in the process itself. Organizational knowledge is defined as all the knowledge resources within an organization that can be genuinely tapped by the organization. It can, therefore, reside in individuals and groups or exist at the organizational level. Extra-organizational. It is defined here as knowledge resources existing outside the organization which could be used to enhance the performance of the organization. They include explicit elements like research articles, publications, as well as implicit elements found in communities of practice that span beyond the organization's limits. Now, coming to the advantage of knowledge. A major advantage of knowledge is knowledge transfer. One of the advantages of knowledge is that knowledge is dynamic. Knowledge can be adapted and developed through the processes of learning and sharing. The impact made by individual knowledge is not as great as shared knowledge. So, sharing within the organization should be stimulated. When a company has restricted competence to efficiency, use certain knowledge, it would be sensible to consider external transfer to third parties who may have the competencies to utilize the knowledge for value creation. For example, a company may have invented a new technology but does not have the capability to produce products based on such invention. The technology can be licensed to a third party that has the production facilities and the marketing and sales capabilities to sell the new product. To ensure the success of this technology transfer, it is essential that tactic knowledge and procedural knowledge are converted to explicit knowledge for easy learning, adaptation, and utilization. Now, coming to the non-conformity. Please see the Auditor Finding Action Report (NC) on screen for writing non-conformities under this clause. This is Auditor Finding Action Report on your screen. As you can see, there is AFR number, date, company, process, clause, standard ISO which changes for different ISOs, category which can be defined in major or minor, non-conformity evidence. Here will be auditor signature, auditee acceptance, root cause analysis, correction, corrective action, responsibility, corrective action plan, has it been accepted or not, assessed by, date, verification of on-site closure, assessed by, date. Now, let me talk in brief about the common mistakes auditor do while auditing. It is highly recommended that being an auditor, you should avoid some common mistakes like reporting of finding without verifying evidence, ignoring the facts, asking irrelevant questions to organization and consulting activities with the client, etc. Auditors should avoid this kind of mistakes which are very common in nature during the audits. So friends, now we have reached at the end of this session. I hope that you have an idea about clause 7.6 knowledge of ISO IEC 20000-1 2018 Information Technology Service Management Standard. I sincerely thank you all for your interest and attention. Thanks and best wishes.